Car crash cases, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts. The attorneys with Josh Wright from the law firm of Hollis, Wright, and host David Lamb.
Good evening and welcome into the attorneys. Thank you so much for joining us on this Sunday night. An interesting topic of conversation tonight. We've got a panel of experts. More on that on the way. But first, just to kind of set things up as to how we do it here on the attorneys, we've got the panel of experts ready to deal with a topic that we believe is of interest to you. It's always better when you join the conversation. Throughout the program, you'll see ways you can contact us down there. We'd love for you to do so. Also, something that Hollis Wright makes available each and every Sunday evening is attorneys are standing by live right now to speak with you. So if rather than sending a text or an email, you'd love just to talk to someone, pick up the phone and give them a call. Take advantage of that opportunity. Leading our conversation tonight from the firm of Hollis Wright is Tyler Vail. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you, David. I appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Our conversation tonight, it's really perfect in terms of how newsworthy it is, isn't it?
Absolutely. Tonight we're going to cover the topic of immigration, or at least try to cover as much as we can about the topic of immigration. And to do that, we're going to have Jeremy Love with us from Love Law Firm. Fantastic attorney, probably one of the best immigration attorneys around. Spent some time in Atlanta at a huge firm, came back. He's opened his private practice here in Birmingham, about 5 years ago or so?
That's about right.
And yeah, so he's doing a fantastic job here. So we're lucky to have him on the show.
Yeah. So Jeremy, first of all, what is it that drew you to this type of law?
Well, you know, I speak Spanish, and it was always kind of an opportunity for me to reach out and connect with a whole group of people that I wouldn't be able to if I didn't speak Spanish. And so, you know, in law school, I was working one summer in immigration for a nonprofit. Now, I thought it was really interesting working with people from mainly El Salvador and Liberia, which was kind of a weird, kind of a different mix, but I really enjoyed it, hearing people's stories. And then after law school, I was able to do a little bit part-time, also doing some litigation, but I've been doing immigration full-time for the last about 8 years now, and I love it.
Yeah, and there's a huge need for attorneys like Jeremy here.
Yeah.
You know, there really is. And you know, the term immigration, like I said, it's gotten plenty of press over the last, I guess, since the election and the campaign leading up to the election. And you know, people hear the word, they immediately think, you know, illegal immigrants. You know, when you hear the term immigration, that's just not the case. So we're trying to, you know, educate people tonight, but then also talk about just lots of issues that are facing folks who are here in this country from other countries.
Yeah.
You know, and I guess really to get it started, I mean, what are some of the different types of immigration status that a person could have?
That's a great question. Well, there's a number of different types of immigration statuses. So one of them would be citizenship. And there's several different ways to become a citizen. Most common is being born in the U.S., obviously, but there's a process that a permanent resident can become a citizen as well. Another one is permanent residency. That's a green card. There's a couple different ways to become a green card holder. And then you have non-immigrant visas, which are like tourist visas, work visas, things like that. There's certain types of humanitarian type statuses as well, like asylum, for example.
Sure.
So there's a whole different list of different types of immigration statuses and different ways to obtain those statuses as well.
Okay. And so the green card itself, is that's for someone who's been here a certain amount of time and you apply for?
Well, there's a couple different ways to get a green card. One of them is a family-based immigration. That is, if you have a close relative who's a U.S. citizen or permanent resident who files a petition for you. And that depends on the relationship. That process can take anywhere from a year or two to 20, depending on the situation. Yeah. And then in addition to family-based immigration, there's employment-based immigration. And that's for people who are here on a work visa. And there's a process that an employer can petition for you to become a permanent resident if they don't have someone else who's a U.S., there's not someone else who's a U.S. citizen who's ready, willing, and able to do the job. Then that's a process. And there are also there are ways to become a permanent resident through humanitarian type applications like asylum that I mentioned as well.
Okay, interesting.
A question we've got here, how can I apply for legal permanent residency through my employer? How can that be done?
Yeah, well, there's a number of steps to do that. One, you have to be here generally on a work visa, like an H-1B type visa. Right. And then the employer has to file for a labor certification with the Department of Labor, certifying the position, showing that there's not a U.S. citizen that's ready, willing, and able to do the job. Then there's a petition that's filed by the employer, and then finally the adjustment of status, which is the permanent residence or green card application by the immigrant.
Okay. So is it true, I'm sorry, Davis, is it true that kind of the more specialized you are in a skill set, the more likely you are to get something like that approved?
That's true. Yeah, the immigration law it kind of favors people who have some type of specialized degree or experience that's in high demand here in the U.S.
Oh, excellent.
It certainly, this election and many previous elections, this is a subject matter that has become very politicized. But in terms of the process of citizenship, do we do a pretty good job of keeping the politics out of that, and there is a process to follow and kind of keep that sort of politics free?
For the citizenship part, in most cases, you're exactly right, because as far as citizenship goes, you have to be a permanent resident first. So the process to become a permanent resident, well, that's what gets really politicized, as well as certain types of non-immigrant statuses like deferred action for childhood arrivals, is something that's been in the news a lot too. Mm-hmm. But as far as citizenship goes, really there's not a lot of change that's been done with that. Being born in the U.S. is the most common way to be a citizen. Another way is the naturalization process. Someone who's already a permanent resident, the process they go through to become a citizen. And there are a couple other ways as well. If you have parents who are U.S. citizens and you were born abroad, in certain situations you can be a citizen that way as well. But you're right, generally there's not a lot of politicization of that process.
Interesting.
Now, help me, because it's kind of hard to keep up with the news cycles being what they are, but has President Trump, because he really ran on the platform of dealing with immigration and immigration reform, what changes have been made up to now in terms of immigration?
Well, the biggest change you've seen is on enforcement. Previously, if someone was stopped at the border, for example, they were generally returned to their home country, whether it be Mexico or some other country. Mm-hmm. And that was a quick process that was done. Now, what President Trump has done is expanded that a little bit to farther away from the border. So someone's been here less than 2 years and they're picked up in Iowa or Alabama or wherever. There's a quicker process for them to be removed from the U.S. than there was previously. Previously, there was a court process that had to be done, and it took several months or a year to remove someone. And now, if it's someone who they consider a recent entrant, which is in the last 2 years, there's a quicker process to remove them from the U.S. than there was previously.
Wow.
Another question we've got here, can I apply directly for citizenship?
Generally, no. That's only really done if you're already a permanent resident, with exceptions of someone who's born abroad to U.S. citizen parents.
Right.
But yeah, first you have to become a permanent resident and then file for citizenship, which requires multiple steps. One is a background check. You also have to do, there's an English exam as well as a civics exam that has to be passed before someone can become a citizen.
Okay.
All right, time for us to take our first break, so let's step aside. We'll pick right up right here whenever we return. As we head to break, a couple of reminders. Those attorneys standing by, there's the number to call right there. If you have a question pertaining to tonight's topic or something else, give them a call to that number there. Also, you can find the firm of Hollis Wright on Facebook if you'll search the term Hollis Wright, and on Twitter at Hollis_Wright. So the firm of Hollis Wright there on social media. Stay tuned. More of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm. Thank you for watching The Attorneys. Now, we hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple. Provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free, so if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury-related topics, you can call, email, or text us. Or you can also follow us on Facebook or Twitter, or simply contact us by going to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us link. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us watching The Attorneys.
Immigration law, our topic of conversation tonight. We'd love to have you join in the conversation. Ways there at the bottom of your screen how you can join us. Also a reminder, attorneys from Hollis Wright standing by live right now just to speak with you. Tyler?
Yeah, we've mentioned the term, and you've said it probably in almost every sentence, about if you are a legal permanent resident,
Right.
then you can start these different processes. What exactly does it mean to be a legal permanent resident? I'm assuming that's something different than a naturalized citizen.
Exactly.
Like I was born here to U.S. citizen parents. I'm not a legal. I'm legal, but I'm not necessarily declared a legal permanent resident.
Exactly. Well, there are some rights that a U.S. citizen has that a legal permanent resident, a green card holder, doesn't have. Okay. First one is the right to vote, as well as holding public office. In addition to that, a person who is a U.S. citizen can't be deported, and they can travel outside the U.S. for as long as they want. Someone who has permanent residency can't stay out of the U.S. for more than 6 months at a time, or they can be deemed to have abandoned their residence. So there are some restrictions and some benefits that a some person with permanent residence doesn't have.
Okay. So once you're given that status, it can actually be taken away from you.
Exactly.
And I saw a little fact when we were coming back from commercial break about different violations, or if you break certain laws, then you can have that revoked.
Exactly.
So the fact that you're a legal permanent resident, I mean, you're still not necessarily, you're kind of on the cusp, but if you do some things wrong, you can still be deported.
Exactly. It's permanent, but you can lose it, so not necessarily.
That's tough. That's tough. Now, what would happen in a situation where if like a husband and wife are traveling outside the country and she had a child outside the country, even though they were U.S. citizens?
Yes.
Naturally born, just, like ourselves. What happens? I mean, is that child automatically declared a United States citizen?
Not automatically. There's still a process. There's a certificate of citizenship that someone can, a process someone can go through to become a citizen when they are born outside the U.S. The requirements for that have changed throughout history, but since 1986, if your parent, at least one parent, has lived in the U.S. for at least 5 years prior to you being born, you can become a citizen if you're born outside the U.S., but you have to prove that, as well as file a certificate in order to show you're a U.S. citizen.
Okay.
A question we've got here: if I have a valid visa, is there a possibility that I'm refused entry into the United States?
Yes, anyone can be refused, who's not a citizen, can be refused entry into the United States for being suspected of terrorism, as well as certain criminal violations, or as we mentioned, for permanent residence, if you stayed outside the U.S. for too long, they can say you've abandoned your permanent residence.
Can you find out why you were refused?
They're not required to tell you, but yes, you can request a reason for why you're being denied entry, but you don't always get the information. You can also request a copy of your file through Freedom of Information Act, a FOIA request, to get a copy of the information that the officer had in your case.
Yeah, which would be tough, I'd assume, because you're coming from outside the country, you may not even know those avenues exist.
Exactly.
Correct, yeah. I'm sure they make it tough.
Another question we've got here: if I have no criminal violations, are there any other reasons to be refused entry?
There's a number of other reasons to be refused entry. One of them is false claim to citizenship, for example. If someone voted in the past or said they were a citizen for some type of immigration benefit, then they can be denied entry to the U.S., as well as someone who U.S. government believes can't support themselves here in the U.S. You have to show that you are have sufficient means to support yourself, as well as overstaying your visa. If someone overstays their visa, they can be denied entry into the U.S. as well.
Wow.
Do I have a waiting period for a visa if a relative applies?
That's a great question, and it's complicated because it depends on who's filing for you. The waiting periods depend on the relation and between the family members, as well as the country of origin. So if you're filing for if you're a U.S. citizen filing for your spouse who's an immigrant, there's no waiting period. There are certain requirements, like a valid entry into the U.S. for that person, as well as good moral character. But if it's a sibling, for example, filing for their sibling, the waiting period's anywhere from 10 to 20 years, depending on the country. And you have to, yeah,
That's a long
10 to
time.
20 years.
Exactly. And that depends on the country. There's a visa bulletin that shows you the waiting period, and that depends because there's so many people waiting in line right now that the people filing right now, if you're from the Philippines, for example, it's over 20-year wait. But that's, people who filed 20 years ago are now able to become permanent residents.
Now, where are they waiting during this time?
During that, you have to wait outside the U.S. or maintain
not
lawful
in this
presence.
country waiting.
Exactly.
Wow.
There are some exceptions to that, but generally, if it's not an immediate relative U.S. citizen, and according to immigration, that's your spouse, your parents, or your child who's over the age of 21 petitioning for you. If it's not one of those situations, you have to continuously maintain lawful presence in the U.S. in order to file for permanent residence.
Man, I tell you, that's a tough process. That's a tough process.
Yeah,
I tell you, one of the things, and I think it's kind of glorified in movies and TV shows, but if you're a U.S. citizen, or if you're someone from another country and you marry a U.S. citizen, you're not immediately just becoming a U.S. citizen.
No, exactly.
I mean, I know TV's done a good job about saying, hey, if you just go marry somebody from the United States, you're fine, you get to come in and be a U.S. citizen, but that's not the case.
So there's more to it than that, huh?
There's more to it than that. And even if it's just, the best situation where someone entered the U.S. with a visa, fiance visa, work visa, marries a U.S. citizen, there's still a process time, which is several months long for the immigrant to become a permanent resident. Yeah. And certain times there's certain violations, immigration violations, multiple entries without a visa, overstaying a visa, leaving, and then coming back again. All those are bars to being able to become a permanent resident. With a few exceptions, they're not going to be able to do it.
Yeah, it's a tough process. I have a good friend that's happened to, where you wouldn't think anything about it. I mean, but it's a mess.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times you can get in trouble for just going traveling to another country during that waiting period or during that time period. And you come back and there's some problems, and it's like, well, I wish I would have known this.
Wow,
It's tough.
Yeah, it is, definitely.
Let's step aside for our next break. When we come back, it's our final segment, so just a few minutes remaining here. A couple of reminders again as we do so. Time enough for you to join the conversation. There you see how you can make that happen. Stay tuned. We've got more of the attorneys talking immigration law tonight. That's coming right up.
I'm Carter Clay with the law firm of Hollis, Wright. When you serve on a jury, you might expect to have all of the evidence presented to you during the course of a case. But there are some forms of evidence that are not allowed in court. In tonight's Legal 411, we are answering the question, why can't jurors see police incident reports? Most jurors would like to see crash reports during a trial, especially since these documents almost always show the investigating officer's opinion on who was at fault for the crash. Unfortunately, Alabama law prohibits the introduction of such reports into evidence. Alabama law states that no such accident report shall be used as evidence in any trial, civil or criminal, arising out of an accident. According to lawmakers who wrote and approved this rule, the reason accident reports cannot be admitted as evidence is that a jury might place too much weight on an official document such as a police report. There are some exceptions to this rule, of course, but most courts generally won't allow this type of evidence to be shown to a jury. Despite this rule, police officers who investigate crashes are still allowed to testify. They can tell a jury what they saw at the scene of the crash, including the road conditions and the positions of automobiles. An officer can also inform a jury of most any statement the people involved in the crash may have said to the officer during the investigation. The accident report can even be used to refresh an officer's memory of the crash. But the actual document itself cannot be introduced into evidence, and the officer's opinion of who is at fault is also excluded. That's because the jury is charged with deciding fault based on all the facts presented. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will always respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you.
Welcome back into the Attorneys Hour. Final segment. It is here. It's upon us. Those attorneys from Hollis Wright that are standing by to take your call, only available for a few more minutes, so go ahead, take advantage of that. Tyler?
Yeah, thank you. You know, one of the things, and I said at the beginning of the show, that we're going to talk about immigration, or at least try to talk about some of the topics about immigration, because it is a huge category of law. So many things kind of get piled in and dumped in, and it all gets this immigration law status. But I think one of the things that's important that people need to realize is that it's not just about legal immigrants coming across the border, into our country. A lot of immigration and the laws that are put in place to help other countries and citizens of other countries who are going through either some kind of war or oppression or terrorism or things of that nature. And I think one of the things maybe a lot of folks relate to recently is the Syrian refugees, that are being displaced from their country, and they're trying to basically find homes, or at least temporary homes for them. So can we kind of talk and change the topic a little bit to kind of move into like asylum, our government granting asylum to different individuals, or even refugees, and how that goes about, and how do we even get them into this country?
Sure. Well, in order to apply for asylum, someone has to come to the U.S. and request entry based on fear of persecution in their home country. And they have to show it's a reasonable fear, and that it's likely to occur, or something that has happened in the past. And they have to show it's a member of a certain group, some type of immutable characteristic about yourself, whether it be race, religion, political opinion, and they're afraid of going back to their country for persecution of that exact issue. So yeah, in Syria, it's a big topic, and that's something that, because of the civil war there, people of certain backgrounds, whether it be faith or political opinion, have a fear of being persecuted in Syria. And so that's why, because of that, many people have requested coming into the U.S. as refugees. And that's why the growing crisis in Syria has been such a big issue lately. Yeah. But yeah, and asylum is something, it's complicated, because you have a lot of people from other countries who you have fear of persecution because of political issues going on there. North Korea is another example. But it's very difficult for someone to get to the U.S. to request asylum. So because of that, you have the Office of Refugee and Resettlement that has a refugee program. It's a long process in order for someone to come to the U.S. To request to come in as a refugee. Right. Okay. There's a process that the UN has to inspect the person to make sure someone doesn't have terrorist ties, as well as once they do that, there's an application that's filed, more background checks that are done, and then before the person comes in, CBP, that's Customs and Border Protection, also investigates the person to see if they have any criminal issues or terrorist ties, things like that, before they can come in.
So these are not just individuals leaving their country voluntarily, flying over here to this country. It's a big process, and almost they may go to 2 or 3 countries in the process before they actually end up.
In most cases, that's how it works. You do see, lately we've had people from, over the last, really from 2013 to 2016, you saw a lot of people come to the U.S. from Central America, from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, because of issues there with gang violence. And so you had a lot of people coming in, coming up through Mexico and requesting entry at the southern border. And that's, the U.S. government, the way immigration policy works, they have the right to come in and then request asylum if they can show reasonable fear of persecution in their home country. If they're not from Mexico, someone from Mexico can be returned to Mexico. Someone from other countries, they're allowed to come in, because we don't remove people who aren't from Mexico to Mexico. And so if they can show reasonable fear of persecution, they have a possibility of requesting their day in court to request asylum status.
I'm curious as to your practice here in Birmingham, Alabama,
Sure.
right? What is kind of the bread and butter of your firm? What are the cases you see most often? What are you most actively doing right here where we live?
Yeah, well, I think our immigrant community is more diverse than you might think. The majority of my cases, probably 75%, are Hispanic, but they're from all over. I mean, it's most of them are from Mexico, but we also have a pretty decent sized Guatemalan population here in Alabama as well, which you might not know. But the other 25% of my clients are from all over, and I enjoy that. I enjoy hearing different stories from people from all over, from Africa or from Europe or from Asia.
And you're helping them gain citizenship? Is that the
right?
majority
Well,
of what you're doing?
my clients. So most of my cases are family-based immigration cases. So you'll have a U.S. citizen who's filing for their spouse or for their child who wasn't born in the U.S. and they weren't eligible to become citizens directly. And so my clients really half of them are citizens, and the other half are their immigrant spouse or other family member that we're assisting in the process.
And how long does that usually, what's the average, if someone walks into you and that's their claim, how long does it take for that child, that loved one, to become a citizen, average, would you say?
If it's an immediate relative, they can become a permanent resident in less than a year. If it's not an immediate relative, it could take multiple years. But that's permanent residence, and then once you're a permanent resident, it takes an additional 5 or 3 years if you're married to a U.S. citizen to become a citizen.
Okay. Another one of the things that we heard quite a bit in the campaign was about other countries kind of dumping their criminals, the folks they don't want to deal with, kind of just ship them to the U.S. How easy is that to do for another country to kind of manipulate our system to unload kind of the folks they don't want?
Well, it's very difficult, because any process go through in the U.S. to become, to come into the U.S. as a non-immigrant on a visa or as a permanent resident, you have to go through a number of background checks. There's biometrics that are done to check someone's criminal issues as well as ties to terrorism. And so it's very difficult to get in the U.S. and the U.S. government isn't required to take anyone in.
Right.
And so everyone has to go through those checks.
Final question for me, but why do you love what you do? You seem to really enjoy this.
It's nice to help people. I think I really get a kick out of that. But more than anything else, I love talking to people and hearing their stories. That's what drew me into it, and that's what really keeps me motivated in immigration.
Right. We are, believe it or not, we're running low on time, but something else I wanted you to cover if you can, and that is U visas. What is that?
Sure. What U visas are for victims of serious crime. If someone can show they were a victim of a certain crime that's on a list, and some of those are domestic violence, kidnapping, things like that, they're very serious. If they can show they were a victim of this crime and help law enforcement prosecute the person responsible, they are able to obtain a visa to stay in the U.S. to continue to assist law enforcement. And there's a path if they continue here in the U.S., they can become permanent residents that way as well.
Okay. 2 minutes remaining. Time enough for a final thought from the both of you. And Jeremy, if you will, you go first, please.
Sure, yeah. Well, it's immigration, as we know, is really complicated, and there are minor details in a case, such as manner of entry, how long in the U.S., prior immigration applications, and relationship with U.S. citizen or permanent residents that can affect someone's immigration case and can change the whole process. So really with any type of legal matter, whether it be personal injury or bankruptcy, it's always important to find an attorney who has experience with your type of case to help you with the process, because you deserve nothing less than that.
Right.
Very well said. I mean, like, so, the tip of the iceberg that we touched on tonight just shows how complicated these cases can be. And there's not just one path to citizenship. You may think you have come in with an idea or something that you want to do, and Jeremy can sit and say, no, that's not the correct way to do it at all. We need to kind of back up and go this route. This will be much better for you. So, I mean, like I said, I'm sitting here, a little bit in awe of him just to his knowledge.
Yeah.
This is not an area that we cover at our firm, and there's a reason why, we bring Jeremy on the show and why we send all our work, dealing with these topics to Jeremy. I mean, fantastic. Thank you for covering this topic. It was a great show.
Yeah, very much so. And I don't think this is a topic that's going to go away anytime soon.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think we're going to be hearing more of this. Jeremy, appreciate the time, sir.
Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure to talk to you guys.
Tyler, good to see you as well.
David, thank you.
Thank you guys so much. And as always, thank you for the time. Appreciate you joining us each and every Sunday evening as we wrap things up. Here's how you can continue to get in touch with the firm of Hollis Wright. Take advantage of that. They answer every single call and email. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time on The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.